It is a brand new Monday edition of Flyers Daily, and it is brought to you, of course, by Ticketmaster. Make more memories live. A lot of memories this past week, none of them good. Joining us as he does every Monday from PhiladelphiaFlyers.com, NHL.com, and HockeyBuzz.com, it is Bill Meltzer. And Bill, this has been quite the stretch of games for this Flyers team as they had total control at one point, but they've
Yeah,
lost total control at this point.
no, for sure. And Flyers got a more than their share of mulligans along the way here too. All these days where they didn't take care of their own business, but they got help. On the out of town scoreboard happened multiple times. Eventually some of these teams are going to start winning. Sometimes some teams are going to play one another, so someone's got to win. Um,
Yeah.
Ultimately the Flyers put themselves in their own situation. Um, really can only look in the mirror here, and really, all there is to do at this point is to try to finish the right way, and the chips are going to fall where they may, and that's where they're at.
Yeah, when you relinquish the control, that's all you can do. You got to finish it with dignity and finish it with pride. I know a lot of Flyer fans want to kind of pin it on one thing, whether that's on the coach or whether that's on the trading of Sean Walker or that's the benching of Sean Couturier. And there's a long list there of things to blame it on. But, Bill, I don't think we can blame it on any one thing. I think it's
No,
a lot of things combined here that we're seeing what we're seeing, and probably which we'll get through on this episode as we get to the Ask Billy questions.
no, for sure. For the same reason that things were in pretty darn good shape for first half of the season, getting into the stretch drive, it wasn't any one single thing. It was a lot of things were going right. There's a lot of things you can point to. It's not any one thing. It's not just because of Carter Hart, and not just because of the attrition on defense, and not just because of the Sean Walker trade, and not just because the power play struggled all year, and whatever you might want to point to. So some missteps, some decisions that might have been worked out differently. You can bundle them all together, and I think the combination of all of them is why this has happened. I don't think it's accurate or fair, honestly, to point at any one or two things, because it isn't one or two things that got them here.
Bill, over the first 45 games of the season, this is pre the Colorado Avalanche game. The Flyers
Yeah,
had a record of 25, 14, and 6. They had 135 goals for and only gave up 121. They were plus 14 in goal differential. We know what happened that Colorado
yeah,
game. It's the last game that Hart plays. Since then, their record till this moment now is 11, 16, and 5. They've only scored 87 goals. And they've given up 121. That's a minus 34 goal differential. Now, goaltending was a strength of this team in the beginning of the year as Hart and Ersson pushed each other, but that has not been the case. And Sam Ersson's got sideways numbers, and I'm afraid he's earned them.
no, he has. I guess part of my concern here with Sam, and I think he's turned in a significant portion of the season, a good body of work. I go back to last year with the Phantoms down the stretch, and he was playing a lot of games there, and kind of hit a wall late in the season. Carried it late in the stretch drive and into the short playoff run that they had. Similar this year, late in the
Yeah.
season where there was a drop off and hasn't been able to reel it back in. It's something that you pointed out, that when a goalie kind of hits a wall, whether it's fatigue or whatever it is, it's pretty hard to bring it back that same year.
Yeah. Once you
I
empty
think
the
I think
tank completely, there's no
yeah,
replenishing it.
yeah, and honestly, I think that's a little bit what happened with Sean Couturier too.
Yeah.
It's not just the goalie side of it. Sometimes uh, sometimes they burn the candle at both ends, and a player hits the wall, whether it's injuries or fatigue or whatever it is. It's hard to reverse that course that season, and I think that I think that kind of happened with Sam. And I think for a while, give him credit that you know even without Carter Hart, it was basically almost exclusively Sam Ersson for a while. Every
Yeah.
once in a while, they mix in Cal Peterson, you know, Felix Sandstrom. Um, I guess more recently Fedotov, but for a long time it was pretty exclusively Sam Ersson, and he kept them afloat for a while.
Yeah.
He was still playing well, but when it started kind of going downhill, you know, I mean, you can't ignore the fact that one of the reasons that the Flyers have really struggled in this stretch after the gauntlet is they have not gotten good goaltending. Um, I don't think they've gotten average goaltending in some of these games. So, I think I think you have to be honest about that. That's definitely been one of the things that was a definite strength for the majority of the season, and as the stretch drive has gone on, has not only not been a particular strength, it's been a weakness,
Yeah.
truthfully.
And they're 0-4-1 in their last 5 since the gauntlet. They've been
Yeah,
outscored 23-9 in that
yeah,
time. And that's why you see the results that you're seeing. The interesting thing, too, Bill, is I always I say you can't really measure a team that's in a rebuild unless they have goaltending, because I don't think players can play in front of a goaltender afraid to make a mistake. And when your
yeah,
goalie's not, I mean, the beginning of this year, they were high flying in transition, taking on odd man rushes the other way when they didn't work. And they had that confidence that the mistake would be erased. When that doesn't happen, coupled with some of the personnel changes that have taken place throughout this season, I don't see a team in transition anymore. You don't see that high flying, get up the ice as much as they did in the beginning of the year. One, I think obviously losing Walker's a part of that. I don't think it's all of that, but
yeah.
also not getting saves, I think, is a part of that.
No, for sure. And you know, we've used the word symbiotic relationship before too, but
Yeah.
Team D and goaltending is that if they're strong, they lift one another up, and if there are holes, they pull each other down. And that's definitely one of the things that's happened. Flyers have made, I've had some pretty egregious breakdowns at times too,
Yeah.
and you know, one is fed into the other because there's not a confidence of saves being made, and there's not necessarily confidence in the players in front, and it also has an effect on offense too.
Yep.
When you're afraid of making mistakes, of turning pucks over, taking some risks sometimes because it might come back in an odd man rush. I think sometimes when you finally do get that opportunity, you're so fixated on finishing this one because you don't know how many more you're going to get,
Yeah.
right? That can, I mean, one can feed into the other,
Yeah.
and it's just been they've all worked together in kind of a downward spiral, unfortunately.
Sam's first 3 games of the year, you take those out. His next 17 games, he went 12-3-2 with a 930 save percentage, 3 shutouts.
Yeah,
Since then, in the 26 games, 9-12-4 and an 871 save
yeah,
percentage, no shutouts. I mean, the numbers don't lie here. They match the eye test as well. Bill, let's get to the Ask Billy questions because we've got a ton. We've got some emails as well. I'm going to break this one into 2 parts because obviously, there's a lot of concern right now on what was, at one point, a very fun season through 95% of it so far. But the last couple of weeks, obviously, have gone really sideways. Let's start with this one. This one comes in from WAB61. It says, comment on how it's possible for a power play to be so poor year after year. Do you equate this to poor power play talent or poor systems? Well, Bill, I look at some of the teams and I look at their power plays that are devoid of some talent, and they
yeah,
have some like I look at San Jose, it's around 20th, 18th in the league, and they don't have a ton of talent there. So you got to look at the roles that players are being put into on the power play, and then the strategic element of it. There's times like I look at that power play goal by Ryan Poehling, the second goal of the Ranger game. That was beautiful power play.
yeah.
But far too often it's static and way too much on the perimeter.
No, for sure, and sometimes the deployment at times, and I'll just go back. I will go back a game. sometimes they revisit things that didn't work before and didn't seem to make much sense in the first place. I'll say specifically from the Columbus game, they had Morgan Frost at net front again, right? Which they had tried once before. They tried against LA in a game where the Flyers got shut out on home ice. To me, you don't put a distributor. They found a little success with kind of a him in the bumper and a double net front kind of thing.
Yeah.
To me, he should never be your main net front guy.
No.
It takes away what he does well, puts him in a situation where you're asking him to do something he doesn't do particularly well. Just as one example of sometimes they'll revisit things that didn't really work before, and it's almost like you go through a checklist. Okay, we're back to this one again. I think that when I've talked about the Flyers power play, I think that there are you need roles and elements of pieces they don't have. Now I'm hopeful that as we move forward here, that Tyson Forster could be that guy on the flank who's a consistent threat from the flank. I think that ability is there, the potential is there.
Yep.
But they don't have that yet. They don't have a flank guy. They don't have a true bumper shooter. They don't have a guy who does what Scott Hartnell used to do for the team. You get a guy on the half wall who can make that short pass, or he can, or you get a guy who can do it from across the ice sometimes. So they don't have their bumper guy. They don't have a flank guy. They don't have a true number one net front guy. I think they're pretty good in distributors. There's no true, and maybe Jamie Drysdale becomes that guy, that consistent threat from the point, to whether he, pinches down to the circles or can beat you from a little bit higher, but they don't have that A1 kind of point threat guy.
Yeah,
they don't have a quarterback. They don't have a quarterback. So those are some major elements missing there, and they've shown hints of it at times for a few games at a time, and it'll click. I do think that, again, they do have some distributors. They do have some kind of secondary pieces you can move around a little bit. But I think when you look at teams in the league, there's not a reason for this to be the worst power play in the NHL 3 straight years. And I'm not blaming Rocky per se, because it predates Rocky.
Yeah.
Right. And even the last year Claude Giroux was here. And this is a mark the Flyers are trying to avoid, which is the worst power play mark in franchise history since the NHL started counting it. 77-78 was the first year the NHL officially started keeping stats. You go by box score stats. By box score stats, the Flyers' first year, 67-68, was the worst year in franchise history. But officially, it was a couple of years ago, and that predated, that predated when Rocky got here. It wasn't like Torch had the answers. It wasn't like, Michel Therrien had the answers. It wasn't like, I don't know. It wasn't like Chris Knobloch had the answers. So yeah. It's not like, it's not like I'm not putting it all on Rocky, but I'm just saying that there's been a lot of changeover, been several coaches in and out. They're still looking for something that works, and that cannot be denied because they haven't found what works.
Today's NHL, you've got to have a relatively effective power play. I mean, you see so many teams just eat on it. You got to be good 5-on-5. Most of the game is played 5-on-5, but you have to have a power play that punishes. And like we saw in the Columbus game, Bill, they get the 4-minute advantage when Brink gets high stick less than 2 minutes into the game. Yeah, they generate some good chances, but you can see their sag after that, and you see the opposition team gets a little jump because they just killed a double minor.
No, for sure. And there's almost, I hate to say the word dread, but several games where they get an early power play, and you hope that if they don't score in it, that it doesn't have a negative momentum effect. It did. It did several times. I think you can go back to the Montreal game. That kind of began this swoon to a degree, right? That was a game where they had a dominating first shift of the game. And, okay, they're off to the start they want to have. Then they have an early power play, and that power play goes nowhere. And power play goes nowhere. Shortly after that, Montreal scores 1-0. You're down 2-0 by the end of by late in the first period. Flyers only held out like 4 or 5 shots that entire period,
Yeah.
and they didn't. That's when the team looks like they're not ready to play. You're spending the whole night chasing the game. Power plays have been, where the best you can hope for is it's not a momentum killer. That's not. Obviously, that's never where you want to be. And honestly, too, sadly, down the stretch, as good as the penalty kill was all year, the
Yeah.
Flyers struggled the last 12, 14 games. About the last 14 games in the the penalty kill have been a struggle, too. Now you have neither side of special teams working for you, and that's not going to work, obviously.
Yeah, I mean they were driving offense out of the PK.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, just keep it out of your own. That's been a huge issue. I know they're ranked third in the league, but that's not recent. That's not indicative of how it's been. Matt Linkner tweets in for Ask Billy and says it feels like a run at the playoffs is over. However, they are still mathematically have a shot. Do you think they have a chance to go back into the quote nobody believes in us mentality and get in, or is it too little, too late? Well, first of all, it's going to take them to collect some points, number one, and get help. But the nobody believes in us mentality, to me, that's kind of washed. One of the words Torts used earlier in the season was a belief. You get the feeling that there's not much belief there right now.
No, and it's it's a cliche. Players playing for one another. They always talk about the group as a whole. I think that a lot of times when too many guys are trying, I've seen players trying to take too much on their own shoulders, and so they'll try to beat 2 guys, for example, or they'll force pucks where there's no play to be made, and so it's one and done, and you're out. Right? I see a lot of that. A lot of that bad body language too. You go back to the bench, shoulders slumping, guys banging their sticks on the boards as they're skating off the ice. All that stuff that you weren't seeing, because if something didn't work, there was still a belief that, okay, just keep at it, it will. There isn't that belief now. There's a, well, it's more of that here we go again.
Yeah.
Kind of thing that you hate to see, because it rarely pretends anything good.
Yeah, and when you do that, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You're gonna will it into its existence instead of beating it back. Phil Braxmeyer tweets in and says, I think the front office should have moved more players at the trade deadline. He said, I believe they sniffed the playoffs and held on to some assets that could have been moved for draft picks or young talent. In my opinion, they deviated from the plan. Thoughts, comments? I look at it, Bill, and go, okay, who else could they have moved? Because you look at expiring deals, they could have moved Nick Seeler and maybe got a 3rd or 4th round pick. They obviously, the value equation, they chose to sign him to an extension and not block anybody long term as well. And the extension is not exorbitant. But who else could they? Scott Lawton and Travis Konecny. I know somebody mentions that to me in an email. Those are players with more term left. So I tend to look at those and go, those are either, if you're going to move Scott Lawton, you're either going to do it in the offseason or you're going to move him at next year's deadline, because teams at the deadline generally aren't taking on multi-years left on a deal when they want an expiring deal, because they're just adding to their roster and they're not giving up a piece along with it.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, the Flyers also made a decision to extend Ryan Poehling, and I certainly understand why, because he's done a fine job this season for the team. I do think Poehling is a guy, who would have generated interest based on still 25 years old, having, not a total breakthrough, but a bit of a breakthrough season, because he was playing a lot more in the upper end of the lineup as the season went along. Brings that size and speed combination. You could have moved him, but he's a guy they want to have around.
Yeah.
I think the decision here is, is there enough diversity of skill set between Lawton and Poehling, and figuring, okay, what and how is Sean Couturier going to be moving forward? Their one skill center is Frost, who's on a, to me Morgan's not a 1C. He's a good 2C. Get the right line mates, get a real number 1 in there. I think he's just fine in that role. But there's not a 1C on the team, not a true 1C on the team. Um, so I think you do need to figure out some of the diversity of skills, and center is an area you might want to look at. But I could certainly understand why you want to have Ryan Paling. I can certainly understand why you want to have Scott Lawton. It's just a question of when's the right time to make that move. So I don't necessarily know that this deadline was the ideal time to make those decisions. So particularly because of how well things are going, you kind of ride the season out, and then you can decide going forward.
Flyers and Hoagies tweets in and says, it seems like everything has gone wrong since the trade deadline. Loss of significant D-men, goalies have tanked, scorers have stopped scoring, goal differential is minus 23. So do the Flyers chalk it up to bad luck and run it back, or make significant roster changes this offseason? I think, the fact that we're sitting here on April 8th, Bill, talking about this team mathematically still alive for the playoffs, and even if spiritually a lot aren't, they've gotten to get some really good intel on a lot of players. And I think it's clear that there's still a lot of change that has to take place here. There's no running it back, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think there's significant moves and aggressive decision making that will take place.
Yeah, I think there's some tough decisions ahead.
Yeah.
You know, I know, for example, I still think that when you put Travis Konechny's season in perspective, I think we do need to realize that ever since the injury that Travis had, was about 6 weeks ago now, he has not looked the same. I'm still not sure how healthy he actually has been. He's playing through it, playing through it because he sniffed a playoff possibility. He saw it in front of him, was having an all-star year, realizes how important he is for the team. I think you have to bake all that in, right? And because now it seems to be a narrative. Oh well, he's shown again he can't come through in the most important time of year. I would pump the brakes on that because again, I'm not sure how healthy he's actually been over the last month or so. That being said, he's due an extension. Are you going to go 8 years at $9 million or whatever that would be, right? Is he re-signed at any cost? At any, I don't know. I think you do have to, at the very least, say, okay, if we were to make a decision to move on, what would that entail? What might come back? I think you have to be open to both possibilities. We're still leaning towards, incidentally, thinking that he gets re-signed, and has earned that deal. But I'm just saying that that's one of the things you need to evaluate, because if he's going to be your centerpiece for the next 4 or 5 years, and then beyond that as a veteran, still a highly paid veteran as part of your core group, I do think you need to weigh, okay, what might our roster look like a couple years down the road, right? Michkov gets here. We still need other pieces to come. So I think that's that's a player. I don't think there are no. To me, there's nobody in this lineup. Well, I might change that a little, but who's an absolute no-brainer. You don't move him under any circumstance. I think everybody should be available at the right cost.
Yep.
And you have to really, have to look at, evaluate what you have moving forward. Another example being Joel Farabee. Farabee had such a consistently good first half of the season, and the second half, since the All-Star break, has not gone the way Joel would have wanted it to go, or they would have wanted to go for Joel. If we had discussed this in January, it's okay. Absolutely, this Joel's a guy moving forward, is definitely part of your core group moving forward. Maybe do you reevaluate that? Do you see what other moves might be out there that might involve him? Or do you say, you know what, he showed us enough over a significant enough period of time that we think that is really who Joel is, and we can, I don't say overlook what happened second half, but we're confident that that's not going to become a pattern in second halves of seasons.
That he'll learn from it.
Yeah, for sure.
Bill, the first 48 games of the year for Joel Farabee, 17 goals, 23 assists, 40 points, and was a plus 11, playing 1602 of average time on ice per game. The 30 games since then, 4 goals, 5 assists, 9 points, minus 23, playing just over 16 minutes again. And you look at it, and I mean, I remember talking about him with you on here, saying, he ends up on this. He doesn't go 2 games without a point very often. When we were discussing that in regards to Travis connecting, Vineet Singh had tweeted in and says, does the recent skid and likely missing the playoffs change their position on TK? He's a heart and soul guy that has not played well during this stretch. His numbers actually are not that bad considering. He doesn't look the same right now, though. To me, it looks like some kind of core injury. And he said it's going to be a stretch. He's looking for $9 million for his next contract. Do you use him to trade for a young high-end center? I don't know that you get a young high-end center when you're trading a winger that's due a new contract and a big raise. I think sometimes we look at assets or players and we think another team's going to give us gold, but you have to look at the fact that a team that takes him doesn't want him for just a year to give you a good package in return, and you're asking them to give a guy a big raise to boot. So that affects a player's value when you go to open market. You can't just say, hey, he's a good player here. Give us one of your good young players and a centerman. Like, a team's not going to make that deal.
No, I agree, Jason. I think that sometimes we can overvalue what the trade market will bear.
The other general manager's not a boob,
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes it's counterintuitive. You're not going to get as many pieces, but you might get a singular piece back for for a 1 or 2 year arrangement that I don't know. You're not going to get the haul that people trade so and so for a haul, right?
Yeah, like define haul.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like people don't make the trade that, like, with the assets the Flyers gave up to bring Eric Lindros in. Those trades just don't exist anymore.
Yeah,
so you really have to to weigh what comes back. I mean, doing really, really well in today's NHL, an example would be the trade of Giroux to, where they were able to bring in Tippett and the first round pick that they'll have this year. That's by today's standards, that actually is a haul. That's about, but there's always risk going both ways.
When they traded Mark Recchi, they didn't know they were getting back a haul, and they did.
They had no idea. They had no idea they just acquired a 50-goal scorer in Leclerc.
Yep.
They thought they were getting a very good defenseman, and they were getting a versatile forward who was mostly a center. Remember, in Montreal,
Yep.
It was mostly on the third line. They had no idea they just acquired a 50-goal scorer. So sometimes it takes a good deal of luck too. But as I said with TK, I think you have to have your eyes open to different possibilities. I still think, if I had to put money on one or the other, I still think he gets the big extension. But I think you need to consider different possibilities too.
You have to look at the flow chart of what you have coming, contracts, everything. It's a big puzzle. After working so many years in radio, Bill, how many phone calls I took about people asking to take out your recycle bin and have them drop off gold in their trade scenarios. Doesn't quite work like that. All right, that's part 1 of Ask Billy. So we will be back with part 2 tomorrow. Everybody, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Read Bill's work at PhiladelphiaFlyers.com, NHL.com, and HockeyBuzz.com. And we'll talk to you tomorrow on a brand new Flyers Daily.